My name is Dominic Martin. I'm a member of the account team at Rocket Software, and I'd really like to welcome everyone here to today's open source webinar. I'm also joined by my colleague Peter Fandel, and Peter will be doing the second part of the webinar, taking you through more of the detail about the scope and the elements of Rocket's open source proposition. So today is actually part of a series of webinars which Rocket has been operating throughout 2020. And we've been doing that obviously because it's been difficult for us to travel and visit our clients as we would normally like to do. And so this has been a great way for us to keep in touch with our client base, also to interact with the client base and understand what requirements you have. But I'm really looking forward to today's session because open source is a topic which is, I think, extremely interesting in terms of what it offers us in the ZOS space. And it's something that more and more clients are asking us about as ways for them to modernize and set their future strategy for the Z platform. So to start things off, I'd like to maybe just take a look at the Z and assess really what's made it such an enduring platform. It's clearly been with us for many decades now. And Rocket, like many other organizations, is absolutely committed to the Z platform. And we are IBM's designated partner for porting open source technologies to ZOS, hence the reason we're having this webinar today. But if we look at the Z, as I say, it's a very enduring platform, and the reasons for that really come down to its performance, its reliability, its scalability. So it's a very available platform, and as such, it's being used by the world's leading organizations, both in the commercial sector, but also in government sectors and agencies as well. It's a very international platform also, used very much by organizations where security is of prime importance, and so we see a lot of use of Z in the financial services sector. Even today, the top 66 banks in the world use Z. About 85% of the leading insurance companies around the world also use Z, and in fact 70% of Fortune 500 companies operate on the Z platform. So it's clearly a platform which has been as I say, very enduring, I think is the word I would use. However, we also need to look forward, and we need to make sure that our platforms, our technology is suited to tomorrow's business challenges. And so we see an awful lot about new ways of doing business. We hear the words digital transformation, for example. We see a lot of organizations moving a lot of operations and interactions with their client base to the web, for example. So openness, agility are going to be key to ensuring that the Z stays a relevant platform in the future. And we believe that this is where open source technology has a role to play, because we either have two options facing us. One is we could decide, well, we want to move on to a new platform and move away from Z. And I know for a lot of people that would send shivers down the spine. It's an extremely risky project to undertake. Z sits at the core of these businesses. So to actually move away from Z would be extremely disruptive. Often projects where this has been undertaken, they tend to overrun in terms of cost, in terms of timescale, and the benefits at the end of it tend to be questionable. We don't really see the advances that people might have anticipated. So the other option is to modernize our platform. And open source is going to be an increasingly important part of modernizing our Z platform and modernizing ZOS. So at this point, I'd like to have the first of the small polls that Pauline referred to. And I'd like to ask everyone on the call whether you are currently using open source languages or tools in production on your ZOS environment, or is it something you're planning to do in the near future? So we should see a poll up here on the right-hand panel. So Pauline, are you? Yeah. And you'll see that you have 4 choices there. Are you using open source languages and tools in production today? Is it something that you're planning within a year after that, or you don't have a defined strategy? And for our partners who are on the call, who maybe don't operate ZOS, you can maybe answer on behalf of your clients what you see amongst your client base. So just give us a few moments. And Pauline, perhaps you can tell me when we have the answers in.
I guess we can close the poll.
Okay. So we should see the results of that in a few moments.
Just 1 second.
So Pauline, do you have any results you can share yet?
Yes, you should see them.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So about a quarter to a third of the people on the call are seeing use of open source technologies happening today. A further fifth are saying within a year. So that would take us to about half of the participants using open source in the production ZOS environment within a year. And yeah, about 60% within about a year after that. So as we can see, it's technology that is becoming more and more prevalent. Slightly slower in the ZOS space than it is in other technologies, and we'll come on to some of the reasons for that as we go through the presentation. And perhaps after today's presentation, it might be something that encourages some of the people who are maybe less sure to consider more strongly the use of open source technologies. So coming back to the topic of modernizing versus replatforming, Rocket sponsored a recent white paper that was conducted by produced by a company called IDC. And basically, IDC surveyed a few hundred organizations who had gone through the process of either replatforming, so they'd either been on the Z series or the I series and decided to move on to alternative technology, versus organizations who had decided to invest and modernize their Z or their I platforms. And basically, the outcome of the survey was very much in favor of modernizing as opposed to moving away from the platform. There were 7 key criteria that made up the survey, and in all aspects, the modernizers assessed themselves as being more satisfied than the replatformers for the equivalent criteria. We also saw greater annual cost savings from the modernizers versus those who replatformed. So one of the perceptions about the Zs, excuse me, is it's an expensive platform to operate. And basically what we believe is if you leverage the platform properly, it's actually very cost efficient. And that was borne out again by the survey. And it's all good and well being satisfied about our project and so on, but what was the impact on the business? And again, the modernizers came out positively there. Through the modernizing steps that were taken, there was obviously a positive impact on the business with annual revenues growing on average by about 5%. Now, we can actually share a link to that white paper, which we'll do towards the end of the presentation. And it's a very interesting read if your organization has been one of those who's been looking at which strategy to follow. Okay, so if we move on. So in terms of modernization, open source is a very important component for future modernization strategies. It brings many benefits. It enables us to bring modern DevOps practices into the ZOS environment, whereas perhaps previously that wasn't so possible. We can be more agile, and we can adopt more modern development practices around ZOS. Open source technologies also facilitate a move towards hybrid cloud strategies, something that's very popular with companies operating the Z platform. open source technologies enable us to integrate with modern web technology. And something else that's extremely important, as I say, the Z has been with us for a number of decades now, and consequently, a lot of the developers have been with us for a number of decades and are now looking longingly at retirement, for example. Well, open source enables us to, open up the Z platform, open up ZOS for the next generation of developers. And so, if we have a modernization strategy for ZOS, it's fair to say that open source technologies has to be a key consideration and a key part of that. So far, so good. Everything's sounding positive. So why are we not seeing, as in the poll we saw earlier, near 100% of people using open source technologies for ZOS? And so our next poll is asking what you would see as the obstacles that would prevent you from, increasing your use of open source, or in fact, even starting to use open source technology within your organization. And this is a question where there can be more than one answer, so you don't need to choose only one, but perhaps you could click what you would see as the obstacles for your organization. Okay.
I will give one more 15 seconds.
Okay, so we're almost there, Polly?
Yeah, I will close the poll.
Okay.
Thank you.
And again, if we just give it a few seconds, we'll see the results of that before we move forward.
It's time to close. Okay, you should see the results.
Okay. So are you able to open up the questions a little bit more, Polly? So I can only read half the obstacles, Pauline. Are you able to run
You
through
can widen it yourself on the screen.
You have to do it yourself.
The highest was lacking open source culture at 47%. Next highest was identifying and remediating security vulnerabilities, 40%. And then 27% each for risk about how well the package will be maintained and concern over licensing compliance. And the lowest percentage was the difficulty in hiring skilled employees at 20%.
Okay, interesting. So we can see, compliance and maintenance are key, but obviously security being being extremely important in your considerations as well. So that brings us nicely on to the results of a survey which was recently conducted amongst the Z community, again asking the same questions. And in number one in this particular survey, the key concern was the ongoing maintenance. Open source obviously is something that is brought to us by the open source community as opposed to the traditional vendor supplied software model. So who's going to take responsibility for supporting that technology ongoing? Now, that's less of a consideration with other platforms that are more readily available and more economically accessible for the open source community. But the open source community doesn't have as much access to the Z platform. So that came out as a concern to organizations when they were surveyed about this. The other aspect is really security. 63% of people saying that was a concern. And that's not really surprising either. Open source, like a lot of other technology, can have vulnerabilities in it that remain undetected for some time. And the open source community will identify those vulnerabilities, enabling people to address and issue patches and fixes to take care of these. Again, because of the lack of volume of people developing open source around Z, that's something that's not quite as available. And we saw, we've seen some quite high profile stories where the likes of Equifax, for example, a couple of years ago were running out of date open source technology that had a vulnerability, and something like 142 million client records were compromised. So security is a key concern if we are already using open source or thinking about using open source technology. What are we doing to address these vulnerabilities? And then thirdly, compliance was an issue for the organization surveyed. How do we control and manage the open source environment within our organization, where the technology comes from and so on. So that, I think, sets us up quite nicely for the background to open source around ZOS, and it brings me on to introducing Peter and asking him to give you more information now about Rocket's Open AppDev for Z offering. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dominic. So I'm here to introduce and talk about our new product offering, Rocket Open AppDev for Z. In terms of the software that is installed on your computer, on your system, it's mostly unchanged from what we were offering the past few years. So we take a series of popular tools and languages, open source, that are available on other platforms and make them available on ZOS. But there are some very important changes in the way we are producing this and the way that we're delivering it that address the concerns that that Dominic was just talking about, that we've been aware of for some time, but it took us a while to come up with solutions that solve them completely. So the first problem I'm going to talk about here is the version currency and rapid delivery of fixes to security vulnerabilities. So in the past, the porting process for each tool, each language, each package for a language, because we also ported about 85 Python packages that were written in languages other than Python. It's very time consuming, it's labor intensive, and having to report those and refresh the ports in real time to respond to security vulnerabilities was a huge problem. We couldn't also upstream all our changes to the communities because every community is different. You'd have to negotiate with each community. Each community would insist on access to a mainframe in order to do their testing. So it's just a huge problem. And so what we've done over the last 2 years, we've been working on a port of GCC and glibc to ZOS. And the way we ported GCC and glibc to ZOS, we did it in such a way that the compile link process automatically injects into the binaries that are produced all the changes necessary in order for that program to run on ZOS. In fact, taking Bash as an example, we will be releasing the next version of AppDev within a couple of weeks that will include a Bash generated through this process with 0 changes to the source code. So we can download the Bash source code, make not a single change to it, build it with GCC, glibc, and the resulting binary already is working better and passing the self-test at a higher percentage rate than the manually produced Bash. So this is a huge change for us, and the impact is in solving the version currency problem. Another major change in the way we are delivering this product is it addresses the problem of usability. So anyone on this call who has tried last year to install Git for ZOS, they realize that, well, Git has dependencies. So you have to first download 4 or 5 other tools. Then you have to FTP them over to ZOS. And then each one of them has a series of 10 steps to do the install. So it was about 40 steps in total to install Git on your Z system. We have since ported Conda to ZOS and packaged ZOS Mini Conda to ZOS and made that freely available to the world. And this is a system, it was originally developed as a package management system for Python, but it is much more than that. It is, you can define environments, manage environments. It has automatic dependency checking and management, and it is not specific to Python. It's language neutral, product neutral, and so it's really ideal for this application. And I will be demonstrating how easy it is to use in a couple moments. And the last pillar that we have on this new solution is Rocket's world-class 24/7 support. I'll be talking a little bit more about that as well. So in terms of what we're bundling in this solution bundle, we chose the most popular of our ports, the ones that were used by customers all over the world. Focused on the developer, we have PHP and Python as languages, Vim, the code editor, we have Git, of course, curl, ifutils, ant, and make. And for the operator, we have Conda, which is now the system for managing your installations, upgrading them, etc. A suite of compression utilities. We have the bash, shell, sed, which, and make temp. And for security, we have OpenSSL, libssh2, and sudo. And this list will grow over time as we get feedback from you saying, well, in my application development and DevOps environment, I really need this ported or that ported. We want to hear from you, and we are much better able with our GCC technology to produce these ports at relatively low cost for us. So as to the Conda system, a little more detail here. Conda allows you to download and install software from things they call channels. So a channel is a repository of software from which you download and install. And Conda supports 3 different kinds of channels. On the left side, the do-it-yourself, you have public channels, and you'll find many and many of these on the internet, and you can download whatever you want from them. However, most, of course, will not be compatible with ZOS. So we have set up a public channel curated with only those ports that are, tested by us to work on ZOS. And then in the middle, we have the high security channel. So Rocket now has a Conda server on our network behind our firewall, secured. And this is reserved for use by our customers who are on support. And this will have the latest updates with the latest security vulnerabilities. And then on the right side, you have the file channel, which is perfect for air-gapped mainframe systems. So in this case, you would populate that file channel once with the entire bundle. And then once it's set up on your premise, then your developers can download directly from that channel without having to go out to the internet to get software. So this shows the workflow on the left and on the right for how a developer would install Git. So on the left side is for non-air-gapped systems. So this is where the developer specifies the secure Rocket Conda channel, and it's a single command to install Git and all of its dependencies from that channel. On the right side, you have the workflow for an air-gapped system using a file channel. In this case, an administrator needs to initially download the entire bundle, create the file channel, populate that channel, and then hand it over to the developers, and they can download from that file channel as needed. And then, of course, periodically the administrator would have to refresh that bundle when there's new versions and fixes made available by Rocket. So, and then there's Rocket's world-class support. Some important details here is that our average tenure of our support staff is 9 years, and Rocket has a 96+% customer satisfaction rating. So when you're on support, we really jump to take care of you. We won't let you fail. We also have a new forum. We've had a forum in the past, but we've recently upgraded it to a new provider software. And the forum is where you can go to keep up with news, announcements of new versions, new fixes, and you can establish relationships with others using our products and share your solutions and whatnot. So here I'm going to switch to a demo. I'm going to switch my window here to a shell. So here I am logged into a mainframe system. Oops, let me get this back. So this system has been set up with Miniconda installed, but nothing else installed. So none of the other ports have been installed. So this is the perspective of the developer who's coming in to start a project. So the first thing that developer might want to do is find out what's available. So I'm going to do a Conda search G*. And this goes out to the channels that have been configured, and determines what is available starting with the letter G from that channel. And you can see that we have get text, Git, and gzip, and there are 2 versions of Git available for download. And it's important to note the last column there specifies the ZOSS AppDev, that is Rocket's secure channel server. And this is an important detail because the administrator who is installing Miniconda and setting it up can choose to limit what channels are made available to the developers within their organization. So if I look at the contents of that configuration file for Conda, we can see the name of the URL of the channel server was specified. The token is there so that the users and the developers don't need to know the password for your account. But critically here is that the administrator added this line, allow other channels is false. So this is to protect their organization from the developers going out to unauthorized channels and downloading software that might not have been tested on ZOS. And this also restricts it only to Rocket's secure channels so that you're getting the latest CVE fixes. So what if this developer wants to install Git? Well, the first thing you do is you create an environment. So I'm going to issue the Conda command there. So it's a developer, so they're going to create an environment called dev. And with Conda, you can have many environments and switch back and forth between environments with a single command, Conda activate. So I'm going to activate this environment. And so now the developer has a new environment into which to download the software they need, called dev. And the single command for that is Conda install Git. So right away, Conda determines what are the dependencies that I need to set up with this. Also, I didn't specify a version, so the default is to go to the latest version. So this is going to install Git 2.26 and all the dependencies of the correct versions for this to work. And I say proceed, and you can see it's downloading everything and installing everything. So anybody who had tried to install our software, as recently as 3 months ago, knows that this is a vastly easier experience for download and install. Should be just a few more seconds. Okay, we're done. So now I can say git --version, and you can see I have git 2.26 installed. that's it. That's the demo. So going back to the presentation, I wanted to go back to this slide of what are the concerns that the industry have voiced that relate to adopting open source. So as you can see, with Conda as a delivery system, we've really addressed the user experience and the ongoing maintenance. And this also addresses the security issue in many ways by virtue of having a private channel with curated software that has been tested for ZOS, as well as the option for a file channel. And then with GCC as the technology behind the product, we are addressing security and version latency concerns. And of course, with Rocket's support offered 24/7, and we have support engineers in 3 different time zones. We're there to take care of you day and night. So back over to you, Dominic.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So I hope everyone found that interesting. As Pauline said previously, we're open for Q&A. So if what you've seen there from Peter or anything I've discussed has raised any questions, please, on the panel on the right of your screen, you'll be able to submit any questions there. So in terms of next steps, you can join the Rocket Forum. This is for all things Rocket, as it says, so not just ZOS open source. There's a range of subjects that you can then pick up with your colleagues and peers from Rocket or other organizations. We also have referred to the IDC white paper during today's session, excuse me, and the IDC report is really interesting if you've either gone through the decision of whether to modernize versus replatform, or if that's something that's perhaps being considered in your organization. It's, I would say, it's obviously, we're pleased to say that modernization comes out as the preferred strategy, but it is a very balanced paper and makes for interesting reading. So certainly recommend that you download that, and the link again is on the right-hand side there. So with that, I'll ask Pauline if we have any questions.
I received one first question. How long does it how long does it take to install ZOS Mini Conda? So maybe
yes.
Peter.
You can hear me, right? I'm not on mute. Yeah. It's about maybe 5–10 minutes. It's a single binary download plus a text file. So you download 2 files from Rocket's portal, FTP them to your ZOS system, and then it is, I think, 3 commands to unpack and set 2 environment variables, or unpack, set an environment variable, and change the execute bit on a file. So it's really very quick, probably less than 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Another comment one was on the first introduction slides and the study that we shared. We can probably refer to that when we share the slides, so that we can share the link, or at least some information on this that we shared in the first part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any more questions, so if we can give a little bit of time back to everyone in this call, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think, Pauline, maybe just to sum up, I hope everyone has found today's session to be interesting and relevant to their areas of concern. This offering by Rocket is proving very popular. It seems to chime and resonate very well with our clients who are now using open source technologies. It's also something that we can get in place very quickly. So, if as a result of today's conversation, or other conversations you've been having internally, you do have a concern about using open source technologies in the production ZOS environment, then come and speak to us. We can certainly provide more information about all the technologies that are covered, about what our future plans are, what's involved in getting Mini Conda set up, and be pleased to talk you through all of that. And as I say, it's something that we can make effective extremely quickly. You have anything to add, Peter?
No, I think that's it. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to working with you, and my team looks forward to working with you.